Yes, we continue the readings from James, and we start with verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Believe and not doubt, because those who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in what they do. And then the second reading is from chapter 3, commencing to read at verse 13, with the subtitle, Two Kinds of Wisdom. James writes, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbour bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness." May the Lord interpret to us his word.
Thanks, Cliff. Now, my father, who is long deceased now, I'll just check on the air. My father used to, during my turbulent teenage years, he would write little notes which were designed to help me grow. And I remember him writing one note that quoted Mark Twain. "When I was 16, Mark Twain said, I was an awful fool. Now that I'm 21, my father was an awful fool, sorry. When I was 16, my father was an awful fool. Now that I'm 21, he's learnt a lot since then." And I looked at that quote, and it took me a while to work out whether Dad was saying to me, in the next 5 years I will change, or in the next 5 years he will change. So is wisdom sort of a part of growing old? A few years ago I updated my mobile phone, and Marge and I were struggling with our phones, and comes along our then 14-year-old granddaughter, zip, 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 and fixes it all up, including putting her photo on the face page. And then you ask yourself the question, is wisdom understanding technology and being able to make it work? Or is wisdom specialisation? Remember when you used to go to the general practitioner and he could do anything? He could take out your appendix, deliver babies, write scripts and all that type of thing. Now you go to the GP and they say, well, we've got a specialist who can handle that, and you palmed off to somebody else. Or do you remember when you were seeking financial advice? You used to go to the bank and talk to the bank manager. Well, the bank manager, it might be there, but the bank is no longer open. So you go to a financial planner and pay a fortune as he rips you off. And then you think of school teachers, those of you who are primary teachers. Remember the day when you used to take the maths, English, geography, art, library, phys ed, the whole works? Now, a specialist comes and does it all for you. And all you have to do, if you're a primary teacher today, is mark the roll. Nothing else to do. It's an age of specialisation, and is wisdom being a specialist. And I can remember some of the older ministers talking to me about the days when they were the only ones in the congregation with a tertiary qualification. And today, we've got stacks of people with tertiary qualifications in our congregations. Is wisdom having a tertiary qualification? And so let's go to the Bible and see if we can discover what wisdom is there. And we go to King Solomon. And he was reputed to be wise. He wrote a lot of the Proverbs, so the tradition tells us. And two women came to him disputing whose baby was, they were fighting about the baby. This baby is mine, says one, and the other one says the baby is mine. And Solomon, in all his wisdom, said, get a sword, chop the baby in half, and you can have half each. Remember that story? And I don't know how wise that was, but they contributed to him to have a lot of wisdom. Or you could be like the writer of Ecclesiastes, who just sits back and says in his wisdom, all is vanity. When we suffer, when we try to do good, when we try to change the world, all is vanity. Did he have wisdom in his grasp? Now, when you come to James, it's different. James has got a different concept of wisdom, absolutely. And the very first thing he says to us, that wisdom is a matter of prayer. Listen to this. This is what Cliff read to us. If any of you is lacking in wisdom, ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to you. But ask in faith, never doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind, for the doubt of being double-minded and unstable in every way, must not expecting anything from the Lord. Now, what James is saying to us, it's not age, it's not education, it's not technology, it's a matter of seeing the world, if you like, from a godly point of view. And what James seems to be saying to us is wisdom has to do with how we get along with people. Wisdom has to do with relationships, and that changes the whole concept of the thing altogether. And the wise person is able to stand back when they're dealing with other people and ask, what would Jesus do in a situation like this? Or how can I be sensitive with a sensitive person? Or what culture is this person reflecting? Or what are the outcomes if we go on having a dispute about this? Wisdom gives you the ability to stand back and see the total picture. Wisdom is about handling anger and handling disappointment. Wisdom is about when you've written a hot email to someone you disagree with, just pausing before you press the send button and reading it through, saying, what damage will I do? Wisdom is the ability to ask if this battle is worth fighting about. Wisdom is about how can I get across my point of view without arguing and without damaging the other person. And wisdom, as we'll discover, is also asking about what are my motives. The other thing that James has said to us in the reading today is that wisdom is being focused and confident. Focused on what you want to do and confident in what you're doing. Not plagued by doubt and double-minded. Now, in our small group on a Thursday morning, we sometimes talk about our doubts and the things we believe in and the things we don't believe in. And I believe, and the Bible does it itself, it's good to bring your doubts to the Bible. And you'll discover that Jeremiah particularly is full of doubts about various things. And when we come across passages, we need to ask ourselves questions like, is this literal or is this poetic or is this metaphorical? Or what is going on here? It's a healthy type of doubt because it helps the Bible come alive. But other people who don't doubt or sometimes do doubt can be double-minded. They can lose the sense of where I'm going in life, what I'm going to do with my life. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are super confident. This is the way it's going to be. It's going to be my way or the highway. Stand back, I am a bulldozer, it's sometimes a gentle bulldozer. And I'm not concerned about how I come across to others, it's my thought that really counts. My way or the highway. That type of person is confident, that type of person is focused, but I don't believe that they're always wise. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the people who are flip-flops. Flip-flops, one day they're confident about where they're going, next day they lose confidence, and they send out a message which is conflicting, and really you can't understand or sometimes trust that type of person. Sometimes when James is talking about being confident of the future, and I think he's saying having a vision. And we as a church, we'll talk about that next week, but sometimes people's vision, as I heard said of one young lady, their vision doesn't go beyond their fingernails. And we need to, I think the wise person can lift up their eyes and see the future, see over the horizon, and see what is going to happen in our lives and in the church lives as well. Now, wisdom, James is saying, is not about preoccupation. Wisdom is not just looking at our fingernails. He is the source of wisdom, and he lifts up our eyes to see other things as well. And James also says, and we're not surprised because, as Marge pointed out to us a few weeks ago, that faith is also what you do. And James says, wisdom is what you do. Let's hear it again. Who is wise and understanding among you? Show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness and with wisdom. Do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come from above, but is earthly, unspiritually, devilish, and from there is envy and selfish ambition. And there will be also disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, peaceful, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits. Now, you often see those cartoons where a guy climbs a mountain to speak to the guru who lives in a cave, and all his life is spent in a cave giving out words of wisdom. And often the cartoon sort of says the person climbs a cliff and asks the question of the guru, what is life all about? James has a different concept of wisdom. Wisdom is not living in a cave, sort of coming up with wise words. Wisdom spells itself out in the way that we live. And when you think of your life, when you think of what you've done, it's interesting to me the number of people I've met in life who in their middle age say, I'm halfway through life, what am I doing? And I heard one young guy say to me, all I'm doing is just making money for other people. And it makes you think about, what am I here for? One of the turning points in my own life, it was in the 1980s, where I went overseas to the Philippines. I was sent there to enlarge my vision by a group called World Christian Action. And I got there and I was astounded at the third world needs. And from that point on, Marge and I have tried to live our lives in the church, leading the church, but also to be people with a third world awareness. And every couple of years we trot up to the Philippines, and we were devoted to giving 2 or 3 weeks of our life to serving those people. And we consulted, we actually uncovered a bit of corruption that was going on. We preached, we taught, and I remember talking about wisdom. The last trip we went there, we were in our 60s, and we were teaching in a theological education place, and Marge was teaching English to about 40 people, 40 young women, basically, men there as well. And these people came from all over the Philippines, and they had different dialects. They couldn't understand each other. I'm not sure they understood Marge either. She tried to teach them English. It was hard work. And I had about 7 or 8 students that I was teaching John's Gospel to. And we would start at 8 o'clock in the morning, work all day in unconditioned air, no air conditioning, just a fan circling overhead, and we'd finish at 10 o'clock at night. Then we'd go home and mark, and get back again 8 o'clock in the morning.
I had 40 to mark. You
And
had 7.
You're interrupting the sermon, Marge. Yeah, she came to bed much later than what I did. And to cap it off, Marge was wearing white slacks, and the rain poured down, and we're walking along, and she slipped in the mud, and swoop, and hurt her back, and was sort of dirty to trousers as well. And on the plane coming back, we wisely said, no more, no more. We realised at our age we weren't equipped to do that anymore. And sometimes wisdom helps you to sort of evaluate what you're actually doing with life. I hope that all of us are using our lives well. And there comes a point where you need to change direction as well. And you need to have the wisdom to work that through. Now, sometimes wisdom means that you're going to be using your life for the sake of others. And I hear stories from the op shop where you guys are not only raising money for the church and for the charity, but you're also spending time with people that are sometimes difficult to spend time with, helping them, counselling and all that type of thing. That, James would say, is very, very wise. And sometimes when we think about that, we think about what our lives are all about. That is wisdom. Now, wisdom is also why you do it. I watch the politicians on television like you do, and we see them kissing babies, we see them having a drink in the pub, we see them sort of being nice to everybody around. But once they go into Parliament House, there's sort of little white line there which they cross, and it causes white line fever. And once they get in there, they become nasty, they become double-minded, and they sort of talk to each other in a very, very angry ways. And when you think about that, you think about what motivates some of our politicians. Surely some of them are seeking popularity in order to retain their seat. Now, what wisdom does, it causes us to stand back and say, why are we doing it? Think about your motives. And this is what Jesus was on about. He said, it's no good just praying on a street corner so that everybody could see you. Go into your room and pray in private. When you give money, you don't sort of drop it in the bag in front of everybody. Praise God that some people do. But we don't drop it in the bag in front of everybody. Give in secret, he says. And Jesus, if you like, got stuck into our motives. He said it's not just what you do, but what you're thinking inside. The inner person is meant to be wise. I think of a lady that I knew in one of our previous churches who was a brilliant organist, absolutely brilliant. She had perfect pitch. You could hum a tune to her and she'd harmonise it for you. She could play most things from memory, and we bought a massive organ, a Yamaha FX20, for her to play in the church, and cost us about 10 grand to do that. And she wanted to make sure that it was placed in a spot where she could see the people. And the cynical part of me was, does she want to see the people, or does she want the people to see her? And I remember, she always played loudly, and I remember one day, we had a lot of kids going through Blackburn High who could play instruments. Pardon me. And so I thought it'd be good to get them involved. And so I wrote out music parts for them and all that type of thing. And that particular day when the little orchestra was playing, she played louder and louder and louder. And then changed key. Now, our young musicians weren't able to do that. And it made me think about what her motives were for ministry. Was it about performance? Was it about people noticing it's her? Or was she serving God? And there's a cynical part of me that says, was she really being wise? Now, James says if there's uncertainty at the core, there's chaos at the edge. And here comes a glass of water, which is a great idea. Nothing better than having a microphone on when you cough. Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Lou. Right, thank you. Now, when you think of that, uncertainty at the core, chaos at the edge. And if we're uncertain as to our motives, if we're uncertain as to why we're here, it just creates chaos around us. Now, smart means you manipulate. Wisdom means that you're prepared to change and think about what you're doing. And James goes on to say, wisdom is also about how you do it. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, peaceful, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And also a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. At the turn of the century, there was a book written by a guy called Goldman. It was a book about emotional intelligence. And it's become, if you like, a landmark in the world of leadership these days. People who have wisdom have, according to Goldman, emotional intelligence, able to read other people, understand where they're coming from, and also able to understand themselves where they're coming from. And I was thinking of a film series that we were watching on Netflix the last couple of weeks, and it's centred in Denmark and features a foreign minister, Bergen, her name is. And there are two characters in this series. One is the leader of a newspaper, lead reporter, and the other one is Bergen, who's the foreign minister. And both of them are disasters as leaders. Why? Because they're abrasive, they're bullies, they boss people around, and you see the toxic culture developing around their various areas of work. And what you also see at the end is people burning out, including the two women who had that attitude as far as work was concerned. James says, wisdom is how you do it. And effective leaders these days have, if you like, emotional intelligence. The effective leader, the person who is wise, does not bully, create conflict, is a good listener, can create positive waves. In other words, wisdom is about giving to life rather than extracting from it. Wisdom, says James, is understanding life. Now I'm going to read to you a passage that doesn't mention the word wisdom at all, but it's implied. Come now, this is chapter 4, 13 to 17. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will give so much to such and so go to such a town and spend a year there doing business and making money, that you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, the Lord wishes we will do this and do that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and such boasting is evil. Anyone then who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it commits sin. To the self-made person, the person who trusts in their own wisdom, the person who is secular in their thinking, James is saying, you are a mist. Now, I think of funeral services, and we've all been to funerals, and I suspect that some of you have asked yourselves the question when you hear the eulogy being given, what will people say about me? Ever thought about that? Some get a long service, some get a short service, some are well attended, some not so well attended. And I think of a guy, I think I've told you about this guy, who I took a service for, had 6 or 7 people there. He was a brute of a father, and the only thing they could say about him was he barracked for St Kilda. Well, that was a eulogy. He barracked for St Kilda, I've got nothing else to say. What will people say about me? What will people say about you? But there's another question. What would you like people to say about you? Think about that for a moment. Because that question is a question that determines what your vision for your life is. What would I like people to say about me? Then that determines what type of living we are offering as far as other concerns. Unwise people just live